New this week on Curiosity Stream. Witness the meteoric rise of YouTuber Jimmy Donaldson, a.k.a. Mr. Beast, made famous by his jaw-dropping charity.
We'd like to give you $10,000. This is where things get fun.
On a new episode of Beyond the Spotlight. Plus, meet unique people with the world's most incredible brains on a new season of Secrets of the Brain. Check them out on CuriosityStream.com. Annual plans are just $20. That's $1.67 a month. Visit CuriosityStream.com now.
Joining us now on the Great Midwest Bank Hotline, he is Tyler Horka, I think that's how you say it, at blueandgold.com on the Great Midwest Bank Hotline. Tyler, did I kill your last name?
You got it right the second time.
Horka. I got you. All right. Tyler, I guess first things first, how is this whole thing played out with Jack Cohen? I'm very, very interested in this. So, what was the reaction when he decided to transfer to Notre Dame and the expectation level that went with it? And where is that fan interest now in Jack Cohen?
Yeah, I think there was sort of mixed reaction at the beginning. Obviously, anytime somebody comes over from a Power 5 program and he gets kind of replaced by an up-and-coming, highly recruited talent like Graham Mertz, there's a little bit of question there, people asking, well, why didn't Jack Cohen stay and, keep the job at Wisconsin or try to beat Mertz out for the job at Wisconsin? So there's a little bit of hesitancy there, but, you get past that pretty quickly, and then you get into spring camp there. And, Jack Cohen, you guys know this very well. He's got a very good arm. He can throw the ball down the field. And I think he's been allowed to do that maybe a little bit more at Notre Dame, just given some of the guys that Notre Dame has on the perimeter, and Kevin Austin, Braden Lindsey, some speedster types. So right now, I think if Notre Dame had a better offensive line, the optimism and excitement level around Jack Cohen would be super high, but that's been a little bit tempered just because, he's getting sacked almost more than any other quarterback in the country. And I don't care who you are, if you're a pocket passer and your mobility is a little bit limited like Cohen's is, your upside kind of falls by the wayside.
The other thing that goes along with Jack Cohen coming in is the angst, maybe, I would think, for the Notre Dame fan base to want a younger quarterback to get in there. I know they've given that opportunity here in the last week or so. Do you think that Cohen holds on to this job all year?
I think it's possible. If he stays healthy, I think there's a really good chance that he starts every game. But like you said, I think there's also a chance that true freshman Tyler Buchner, who's also very highly recruited, kind of like Graham Mertz was, there's a lot of people that would really like to see him get, more opportunities than he's getting right now. It's kind of gimmicky when he comes into the game right now. Defenses probably know that he's going to run. It works against Toledo because that's the first time anybody saw him. But, I think Wisconsin's had a few weeks to prepare and look at that film now since that game. And Buchner got hurt against Purdue last weekend too. He's a little hampered with the hamstring. So I don't know if you see him a lot this weekend against Wisconsin, but going forward, absolutely. If this Notre Dame offensive line continues to struggle, like I said, Jack Cohen's mobility is a little bit limited. So you want to put a playmaker behind there who, can get out and run a little bit. Jack Cohen's not that guy. Tyler Buchner is that guy. And, he can throw the ball a little bit too. So yeah, I think there's definitely a possibility that Tyler Buchner kind of usurps Jack Cohen's position by the end of the year. But if Cohen's healthy and if this offensive line improves, I really think that the Notre Dame coaching staff likes what he can do with his arm. I mean, this is a guy that threw for 366 yards against Florida State in week 1, primetime game. Everybody in the country was watching that. So when all things are clicking with Cohen, I think that Notre Dame likes him to be the guy. But, sometimes you can't get all things to fire on, all cylinders like that. And that's when you'll probably see Tyler Buchner come in and steal some reps.
Tyler, the Florida State game is just, it doesn't count. I mean, they're horrible. I mean, if you've watched the next two games, I agree with you. Week 1, he does what he does. Mertz looks awful against Penn State, and Badger fans are like, oh, my God, they screwed up. They should have kept Jack Cohen. What were they thinking? Mind you, nobody was lobbying to keep Jack Cohen at that point. But then you see what happens in week 1. Everybody's like, oh, they screwed up. Now, not as much of that, I don't think, after seeing what Notre Dame has looked like the next 2 weeks, what Florida State has looked like the next 2 weeks after that. It's funny you bring up the offensive line play for Notre Dame because I think you can say similar things for the Wisconsin Badgers. Their offensive line hasn't looked like the big mauling offensive line that we've seen in previous years with this Wisconsin Badger program. And then on top of that, you talk about the running backs. You get the transfer from Clemson, which is fine. You got Jalen Berger, who is still there. The most talented running back is probably their freshman who got a little spot action at the end of the Eastern Michigan game, Braylon Allen, who's just an absolute beast. But in the true Wisconsin fashion, I'm sure he probably won't play all that much, and they'll probably redshirt him. But having said that, there's just not as much there at running back and offensive line for Wisconsin like there has been in years past. What about Notre Dame from a talent perspective on that side of the ball?
On the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the talent is there. That's what's frustrating for Notre Dame is that you have Kyron Williams, who a lot of people thought, I know running backs don't win the Heisman anymore,
Nope.
But if anybody could, maybe it's that guy just because he's a beast out of the backfield catching the ball. He can line up wide. He can line up in the slot. Obviously, he'll line up behind the quarterback in the backfield. So, I mean, he's uber talented. Chris Tyree might be even more so talented. He's more of a home run type of threat, but he can do a lot of the same things that Kyron Williams can do. You ask him, to run between the tackles or straight up the middle, he can do it. You ask him to line up as a wide receiver, he can do that too. So the talent is there. I mean, I talked about some of those wide receivers as well. Kevin Austin probably had a game that he'd like to get back against Purdue. I think he was targeted 7 times and didn't make a single catch, had a couple drops. Jack Cohn overshot him a few times, but he's a big 6'3", 215-pound guy who can make plays on the outside. And Avery Davis is a guy who last year, he's team captain, led the team in receiving yards among all the wide receivers. He had a 120-yard game last week against Purdue. So the talent is there. It's just, I mean, everything starts up front. You mentioned, Wisconsin's offensive line struggling a little bit. That hurts Graham Mertz. And when Notre Dame's offensive line struggles, that hurts Jack Cohn and all the guys that I just talked about.
When we talk about this Notre Dame football team and, how much they've competed for national championships and everything else, and Fox Sports college football Twitter account put out a thing the other day, a couple days ago, about comparing the recruiting of Wisconsin and Notre Dame. And you look at the stars, and Notre Dame has double the amount of 4-star kids as Wisconsin. Wisconsin, the same for 3-star kids to Notre Dame. Obviously, you want to be the one with a 4-star leader. And then 5 stars, only 1 5-star, according to Fox Sports, with Notre Dame, 2 for Wisconsin. Is that kind of how it's always been, or is it just kind of down a little bit versus previous years with only 1 5-star kid?
No, I think that's kind of the status quo for Notre Dame. Obviously, you'd like to fill those recruiting classes with as many 4-star kids as you can, and then, the rest kind of fills in with 3 stars. But I think there's a little bit of a mixed perception nationally when it comes to Notre Dame's recruiting, in the sense that obviously the brand is just about as big as any in the country. I mean, brand-wise, I put it right up there with Alabama right now.
For sure.
The Georgias, Floridas, USCs, whatever it may be. But those are all the programs that are getting the 5-star kids. With Notre Dame, you got to remember that, this is an academic institution first. And, a lot of these kids that Notre Dame's bringing in as football athletes, they're really smart kids too. They're coming from prep schools. They're coming from private schools. They're coming from places that some of these other public universities just aren't grabbing kids from. So, yeah, I mean, to combine the academic side with the athletic side is something that Notre Dame's always had to balance. But I will say Marcus Freeman, the new defensive coordinator who came over from Cincinnati over the offseason, he kind of pushed the narrative that, that's got to change. And he said, you could find 5-star athletes who are also good in the classroom. And I think Notre Dame always had this, stigma about it that, we've got to go after the Notre Dame kid, and this is where you find them. Well, Marcus Freeman has come in and he said, you know what, we could find, talented guys who are good in the classroom elsewhere. And if you look at the recruiting rankings right now, Notre Dame's, hanging around the top 5 in most of the outlets that you look. So I think some of that has changed, and you probably will start to see more 5-star guys come in as long as Marcus Freeman is here.
Talking with Tyler Horka, again, of blueandgold.com. Follow him on Twitter at TBHorka, part of the Rivals Network. So I'm curious then. I'm going to follow that up with, what is the recruiting footprint for Notre Dame? Obviously, they're national. I get that part, but where are they really heavily recruiting the most right now?
Yeah, you'll see a lot of guys come out of the Chicago area, obviously. I mean, anytime you've got a metropolitan, place as big as Chicago right around the corner, then you're going to look there first. But they've been looking down in Florida a lot. They've gotten some commits from Florida. I mean, they just got a 4-star running back, Cedric Irvin, from down there to commit out of the 2023 class just this week. So that was a bit of a surprise too. His dad played football at Michigan State, so a lot of people thought he might go there. But that's a kid that, coming out of the Miami area, he's being looked at from all over the place, and Notre Dame is included in that. So it's really the big metropolitan areas that Notre Dame is looking at. I mean, Chicago, Miami. I'm from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and before the season started, Rivals sent me down there to look at, 4 kids that Notre Dame is heavily recruiting from 3 different high schools down there. So, the DFW area has been, is becoming pretty huge for Notre Dame. So to answer your question, the footprint is kind of all over the place. If you laid out a map of the United States, you're going to need a pretty big foot to, stamp down all the places that Notre Dame is looking at recruiting-wise.
Perfect. He is Tyler Horka. Hey, man, thanks so much for coming on. As always, we always do this prediction time. Who you got, Notre Dame, Wisconsin?
Man, I've been wrestling with this all week, and I think everybody else has been too. But I've settled on Notre Dame 20, Wisconsin 17, and my disclaimer is I could see it being the exact same score the other way around. I think it's going to be close and low scoring, but I've got the Irish right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. Tyler, thanks so much for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. Have a good weekend.
You bet you. Take care. Follow him on Twitter. Again, it's real nice and simple. TB Horka, H-O-R-K, part of the Rivals Network, and does it with the Rivals site, blueandgold.com. You join us on the Great Midwest Bank hotline. We're applying for a home renovation loan as you're feeling anxious. Breathe and let Great Midwest Bank help you experience a state of banquility. Get started at greatmidwestbank.com.
Have you cut the cord and are feeling bored with your streaming services? CuriosityStream can help. With thousands of documentary films and TV shows, let CuriosityStream put the science back in your screen time. Astound you with history come to life and wildlife that will reach out and grab you. We've got the fix for your nonfiction addiction. Watch us on any device, anywhere you are. Visit CuriosityStream.com to sign up and start streaming now.
Hi, I'm Ellen Pompeo, and I would like to introduce you to my new podcast, Tell Me. I'm going to invite people that I find interesting to come on and tell me their stories. That's where Tell Me comes from. Listen and follow Tell Me, a podcast presentation of Cadence 13 with me, Ellen Pompeo, now for free on Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts.
The climate crisis is here. Time's slipping away to stop the worst effects of global warming, and we need solutions. Hosted by me, Molly Wood, How We Survive dives deep into the economics, the tech, and the human stories behind those solutions. From billionaires trying to monopolize lithium mines to business rivalries so fierce that one CEO was dragged off a plane by federal authorities. How We Survive, following the money to the end of the world because our survival might depend on it. Listen on Odyssey and everywhere you get your podcasts.